God only knows what you've been through. God only knows what they say about you. God only knows how it's killing you. But there's a kind of love that God only knows. God only knows what you've been through. God only knows what they say about you. But God only knows the real you. There's a kind of love that God only knows.
Welcome to the 33rd episode of Your Journey Is Not Over. My name is Tanya Pearson Randolph. This is my own personal journey, and the expressions and opinions are of my own. I own all the rights to my personal journey and to Your Journey Is Not Over, neither to be used, copied, or edited in any way without my consent. When I left off Tuesday, I said that this would be the summer everyone around me would not be able to forget. Let me give you some backdrop on this before I let you know exactly what I did. So it's summertime, 1985. I was now working at 2 different dairy bars, and I was swimming and drinking and smoking and hanging with friends. By the way, a lot happened this summer. I was still on eggshells at home around my mom. I had to make sure the entire house was clean before I could go anywhere. So I was up early every single day to get things done and up to her expectations, which, by the way, were high expectations. First thing I remember this summer was I'd gotten off work at one of the dairy bars, and some older friends that I worked with wanted to go out after work. By the way, I did have a curfew every single night that at first was invented by my boyfriend. We set it up to where we wouldn't get charged for the calls. Remember, this was before free long distance. So he would call collect and say some random person's name, and I would answer the phone and say no to the collect call. That was his way of knowing I was home on time. And I have to say, every single time I would be home to get the call, and I would think I was slick, I would go back out. He knew it every single time. When I would come in later on, I was always told he had called and spent money to call. So I would have to call him back. And if you know me, you already know. I sang like a canary. I tell him myself. He did keep a tight rein in on me, in which now I'm so grateful he did. Again, structure and expectations for me to always be the best that I could be, and to make wiser decisions, in which I wasn't so good at. So I go out with these older friends, and yes, we were drinking and smoking, and it was raining that night. We happened to be on a road that had just got blacktopped, and all 3 of us were in the front seat of my friend's Regal, or it was a Cutlass Supreme. It was one of the two. I'm not real good with cars. And I was in the middle, and I just touched the driver's leg and told her that maybe we needed to slow down. Remember my fear of car crashes from childhood memories. We were going pretty fast, and she went to turn left, and we went straight into a telephone pole. It was the worst. My friend, the driver, broke her nose on impact, and of course, blood was everywhere. I ate the dash, but I didn't even realize I was injured until later on. The adrenaline kicked in, and me and the other girl were throwing all of the liquor out of the car and over the train tracks that were close by. We could hear the sirens coming, and my friend, the driver, kept telling us to run, to go. And I just remember I didn't want to leave her. That's not what kind of friend I am. But she kept telling us to go so we wouldn't be in trouble. So we ran off at the very last minute before the ambulance got there. My friend who was driving that night, if you happen to listen in, please know I am so sorry I left you. I know you told me to many times, but I should have stayed with you. And I'm so sorry that I didn't. I made a bad choice that night. We walked a good 5 miles to this girl's house that I barely even knew. I know we were quiet on the long walk, most likely in shock. It was a huge impact. It wasn't until we got to her house that I realized I was hurt too. My nose and my lips were busted. I had eaten the console pretty much. Going home the next day was a dread. I had to explain this to my mom and to my dad, and I knew my mom was going to pretty much go off on me. So you would think this car accident would have shook me up, made me think about making better choices, right? No, it didn't happen like that. I continued on. Looking back now, I guess I thought as long as I worked and I took care of my responsibilities and I saved my money, my nickname was Tightwad Tanya, then my free time was partying time. And I did always hang around with older friends, friends that drove. So I was 14 years old and was definitely way ahead of my years. Essentially, I was acting 16 or 17 years old. Yes, as a parent and a grandmother now, I look back and I think, how did I become so grown up at such a young age? I really never had time to be a child. Maybe that's why my inner child comes out so much now. And it's only since I started on my yellow brick road, my healing journey, that I've allowed it to come to the surface. I do laugh a lot more, and I'm silly and goofy. And my friends recently have told me that I have a childlike innocence about me now. Life is a lot lighter now. I know people are wondering, where were my parents during all of this, right? Well, in complete defense of my dad, he married into this, and I was already headstrong and a rebellious teenager. And he tightroped on what boundaries to cross, not only with me, but also with my mom. Sometimes it would be okay for him to step in, and other times not. But I will say, I had respect for my dad, and I still do. I truly loved my dad, even then. And he was always my logic and my voice of reason. And I have to say, with humor, he used a lot of reverse psychology on me. Hey, Dad, whatever it took. My mom would try, but after everything I'd been through, how could she even think I would listen to her, let alone respect anything she had to say? So again, my boyfriend implicated the rules on me. And for the most part, I listened to him. Also, this summer, I got drug off of my moped, and it was by my aunt and what was one of my closest cousins. My uncles had a habit of leaving their wife and kids, and somehow they always ended up staying at our house. And of course, involving my mom and dad, and this time me, in their chaos and drama. There were no limits when it came to my family, as you will soon learn. Hillbilly is the word I use to describe my family. Hatfields and McCoys, except we're the Hatfields and McCoys combined in one big family. So one uncle is staying in our extra rooms, and unbeknownst to me, I was being watched. My comings and goings on my moped were being watched. I had no clue there was even a problem involving me. That was the adult stuff, and I was definitely not involved in who stayed or who left their wife and kids. I was close to my aunts and cousins because I was forced to stay with everyone when I was younger. And this particular aunt was always so good to me. So it was me, and I had a friend on the back of my moped. I came down a road I always used to come home. Next thing I know, I was thrown off of my moped, and I landed under a fence. At least my face did. I would like to think I landed perfect, because had I been off a little bit, I might have hit the back of my head, and with the force in which I was thrown, it would have definitely done some damage. Really didn't know who had me until I was on the ground, and shocked is an understatement. It was one of my favorite older cousins and my aunt. They both were on me. I had about 600 pounds on me. My body and my legs were completely tied down. So I hollered for my girlfriend that was with me to go get my mom. I was throwing fists, but that's all I could move. And the only part of my body that was protected was my face. I was laying on that ground and it seemed like forever, but eventually I seen my mom's feet, and half of the neighborhood was behind her. And her and my aunt did fist fight. Then it was over. I was in shock. Never had even thought my family could go so low. I've seen lower since then, though. But this was all because my mom and dad had let my uncle stay at our house. So essentially, they came after me to pay my mom and dad back. Who does that? I was innocent. I had no dogs in that fight, but I was the one who got the brunt of it. So my brother took an emergency leave from the army and was home within days. Again, no warm greeting when he hit the door. He was mad. Madder than I'd ever seen him in my life. He told me straight to the bathroom. We went into the bathroom and he closed the door and said, "I want to see." I was black and blue from the shoulders down to my toes, and I had bruises all over my back where I was thrown off of my moped. I will never forget my brother's face that day. It was a complete mixture of shock and rage. I wouldn't know until many years later. Remember, I'm the soft-hearted one. So my brother kept a lot of stuff from me. He shielded me, and he always protected me. But what I found out years later, my brother called his best friend and got some guns together. And I have to add, my uncle had moved back home to his wife and kids. In fact, the day I got drug off the moped, he went back home. So apparently, my brother wanted to make something very clear to the entire family. So he did it the Hatfield McCoy way. He showed up to my aunt and uncle's house and invited himself inside, and at gunpoint lined up my uncle, my aunt, and my 2 cousins. And he made it very clear that nobody better ever touch his little sister again. Again, years later, I was told about this, and yes, my jaw dropped. I couldn't believe my brother would do that, but he did. As I got older, I got close to my uncle, and he would come for coffee a couple times a week. But I didn't speak to my aunt or my cousin until about 11 years ago. Yes, I forgave them, but it took me a lot of years. My aunt, there really was no excuse for it. But my cousin, we were both kids of a dysfunctional hillbilly family, and she was made to do what she did to me. As I said in the beginning of today's podcast, a lot happened this summer, and I thought I would be able to fit the whole summer into one episode. I was wrong. So please stay tuned. This concludes my podcast for today. Please join me next Tuesday. Everyone have a wonderful weekend, and always remember, your journey is not over. God bless.
God only knows what you've been through. God only knows what they say about you. God only knows how it's killing you. But there's a kind of love that God only knows. God only knows what you've been through.